Hey everybody, welcome back. It is the Razzball Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am Bowden, joined by the Fantasy Master Lothario, Gray Albright. How's it going over there, Gray?
Good, man. So I see you're doing the football pod with Rudy this year.
I am.
Yeah? Okay. So
I am.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but hair or no hair? Which Razzball co-founder do you prefer? I don't want to put you on the spot. You can answer however you want. I'm just saying, me or Rudy? Which one?
I think for the fact that I have to spend more weeks with you, Gray, I think I'm gonna say you. Definitely.
Okay.
Also,
it sounds like you're making a little bit of a calculation here. It's like an insurance adjuster trying to figure out exactly. You're doing odds, I think.
Well, this is the first season with Rudy. It's literally the first show with Rudy. I talked to you like 48 weeks of the year or so. So, just going with that there. I think that's probably a good call, And we've actually met in person, Gray. I've actually hung out with you, not baseball related. So that definitely builds a little bit there too.
We did. We had a wild 2 hours in Vegas. You and I talked to Donkey Teeth, your former football podcast
and baseball.
and baseball. True. Your former podcast co-host. And for people who don't know, Donkey is currently in Nepal, the country of Nepal, and he is silent. He's going silent for 6 months. He joined a monastery and is going silent. This doesn't sound real. It doesn't, but I feel like I needed to update people on what's going on with Donkey Teeth. Bobby Lamarco he has taken over full time on Razzball Football for editing and for content over there. We're not relying on Donkey Teeth, who is silent in Nepal. He's silent. He has joined a monastery. I talked to Donkey Teeth this past weekend. I was like, so are you ready, man? Like, how do you prepare for this? Like, do you talk a lot, like, going into it? What exactly do you do to go silent? And he was like, I think I think I have to prepare. Like, I have to get people ready to prepare my meals because I'm not gonna be able to order food for 6 months. I was like, that's probably a good idea. That's a very practical thing to think about. You have to do DoorDash for 6 months in Nepal. You got to figure that out. Anyway, I'm updating people. So when he comes out of his silent retreat in March, he's literally going to be silent from I believe it's today until the beginning of March. When he comes out, we'll let everyone know what Donkey Teeth's new first word is, because when he first started talking when he was a baby, he had a first word, but now he's gonna have a new first word, so we'll let people know that in March.
Maybe he'll come out with a new like accent, Gray. It'll be completely different. He'll sound like Italian or like French, just some random accent just thrown on him.
Hey, Don. Hey, I'm a Donkey Teeth. I go silent as a Midwestern accent, and I come out as a old man Italian.
Like, hey man, there's donkeys that don't speak. That's really just kind of how normal things go.
Yeah,
you got to be like Shrek to be like, a standout donkey,
He's
and he had to talk. He's just making himself a regular donkey now. It's sad. It's sad to see.
He's going back to his roots. You know what else is sad?
Yeah, that's a good segue there, Gray. Venezia got a 2-year extension. And in case you're wondering, who is that? Because why would you know this name? He's the Angels GM, and I mean, why wouldn't he get a 2-year extension, Gray? He's handing out the worst contract in baseball to Anthony Rendon. He let Ohtani walk in free agency without getting anything back at all. He signed Ron Washington to just mismanage every little bit of this club. Traded for Eduardo Escobar. That was a good one. Worst record in the division. Just worst record. I mean, hasn't made the playoffs yet in 4 years. Five seasons, 4 years. Is 71 games under 500. This is ridiculous. What's going on here? How do I get into baseball management, Gray?
Not by co-hosting the Razzball podcast.
Are you sure? I mean, I don't know.
No, I honestly, I don't think it's going to help you. Okay, so I feel like there is a really fascinating expose as to what's going on with the Angels and Artie Moreno as ownership and Perry Menenzel as the GM. Like there's something going on because they're basically the American League's Rockies. They are completely mismanaged from top to bottom. I think there's something really I don't know. I feel like there's something deeper here than just because Artie Moreno, he seemed to be willing to spend money, but is it is there a certain is there a personality trait that is there's something missing here because somehow, or he doesn't understand where where Perry is taking the team. It just doesn't make any nothing makes sense with the Angels really. I don't know what's going on. I honestly feel like with the Rockies, I think it comes down to the Manforts, or is it Monfort, Dick Monfort and his son, they are, in control of most of what goes on with the Rockies, and they're idiots. So that kind of makes sense to me, because it's Dick Manfort, he owns it, and then he owns the Rockies, and then he put his son in charge of the scouting and everything. So they don't scout well because his son doesn't know what he's doing. It's basically the idiot father and the fail son. And they have these sort of I remember they kept on players because the player was a Christian. They really look at their faith and they base baseball decisions on that. So if a player is a Christian, he might actually get a better contract. That was I believe it was a few years ago where they were well, he reads the Bible by his locker in order to get a contract. So the Rockies kind of make sense though in that respect, that I know what's going on there. With Artie Moreno, I mean, he's trusting Perry, and there's nothing that if I was Artie Moreno and I was you know what, here, go do your thing. And your thing was to go and sign Rendon and Brandon Drury and just make a complete mess of your team. If that was your thing, and I didn't really know anything other than well, we suck. So why would you then extend that and extend that GM for another 2 years? Unless he's really gullible and he was able to be he was fed a bill of our prospects are coming along. Like Christian Moore does look good, but I mean, how much can he do? And at one point, Joe Adell looked good too, and it was like they completely mismatched him. So I don't really know what goes on with the Angels. I think there's something there that's like a much bigger thing or some sort of like flaw in Artie Moreno's like thought processes when it comes to baseball, because it's definitely not a clear cut like I want to win, here's some money, make us win, because they're not winning. They're not even close. I mean, they're awful. They're not even close to winning. They're a really bad team. And this year, I mean, the putting like, the Willie Calhouns, Kevin Pillars of the world, like everyone who gets DFA'd, picking them up and starting them every day, like that's a mess. Like they're like the Angels are really bad. I feel like the White Sox are so terrible and the Rockies are so bad that it's sort of getting lost as to how bad the Angels are. But the Angels are really bad. Like the Angels they're worse off than the A's, and not just in record. Like you look at the A's and you're like, oh, that's a pretty good player. That's a solid one. I could see him being good. You look at the Angels and you're like, well, I don't know, maybe Nito, I guess. I mean, like Nolan Chanel does not look like anything we were promised. Like, I don't know. I mean, Adele has, he's been better in the second half, but he's really he's struggled for like 5 years now. I mean, we have to be honest with Joe Adele. Like, he may just not be a major league player. Like, he could be potentially a Nippon baseball player. I mean, he may need to relocate, is what I'm saying. Rendon's awful. Trout can't stay healthy. I mean, there's a lot of issues. Logan O'Hoppe looks fine for a catcher. I don't know. They're pitching so bad, like really bad. Like something like I was saying, I think someone said to me at one of the like Tout Wars or Labor or one of the drafts I go to, where someone mentioned that like, certain teams when they develop pitchers, like they're just not like they never trust those teams to develop pitchers, and the Angels were one of the top ones that like no one like people just don't trust them to be able to develop pitcher. And you look at like Ben Joyce, he's throwing 105 miles per hour and he has a 7K per nine. It's like, what are you doing, man? Like how is that possible that you're throwing 105 miles per hour and you can't strike out anyone? So anyway, the Angels are bad.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, Gray. If I've ever heard one, I really don't know how you get an extension off of this. Maybe the deal was just like keep us top 20 in attendance, and we'll extend you, because that's literally the only thing that the Angels have done, and that's just because they're in LA. They probably sell a bunch to companies. Like, it's a huge market. They like by default they sell tickets. It can't be that people are buying tickets like to actually go see the Angels play, right? I mean, maybe when Ohtani was there, but right now it's kind of crazy that anybody goes to the game at all, because this is just the saddest lineup. Yeah, I mean, Adele has just been terrible. Neto seems like the only person they've really developed internally that has shown any success. And I don't even know if that's them. I think a lot of their arms are interesting. I think they've had a lot of interesting arms, and to your point, just cannot really get it out of them. Or if they do, it's like, it's a half a season and then they revert to being terrible, like Griffin Canning and Patrick Sandoval and others. Like, we've seen them be good for
Reed Detmers.
Reed Detmers. I mean, he's actually pretty decent when he pitches. He's just never healthy. But like, these guys show up, they'll pitch like 2 months where they're good, and then I don't know what happens. The Angels are like, no, stop doing that. That's definitely not working. With the good numbers. Let's go back to being bad, and let's do what we were doing before and be terrible. I don't really understand it. It's absolutely awful. you got to mention a couple other teams. Side note, the White Sox are 41.5 games back, Gray. They're 41.5 games back of the wild card. The Marlins are 23 back. So just to give you a gap here, the Angels, who we just mentioned are a terrible team, shouldn't be extending anybody, are 18.5. Do you understand how bad and how incompetent you have to be 41.5 games back, Gray? That is, I mean, I don't even really have words for it.
Yeah, I know. That's also another like interesting scenario because like you would think like Reinsdorf, I want to say he's like 87 years old. Like the Pete Sedler situation with the Padres, RIP Peter Sedler. Like their owner passed away last year, but he was putting a lot of money into trying to win before he passed away. You would think Reinsdorf is like, I mean, he's 87 years old. You would think he'd be like, I mean, they're not going to bury him with money at some point. I mean, at some point soon, you would assume he's not going to be around anymore. So you would think he'd be like, I don't know. Maybe he's planning on living forever. I don't know. Maybe he's doing blood transfusions. I'm not sure, man. But if I were Reinsdorf and I had billions of dollars, I'd be like, yeah, let's try and do something with the White Sox. Actually, in fairness, no one should ever be fair to Reinsdorf, but I mean, they have spent money. They just haven't spent money correctly. So I don't know. The White Sox are a really bad team. They're actually, I mean, they're historically bad. I think the funniest thing out of all this with the White Sox is that they're going to have potentially the worst record ever in 162 games, and they can't have a draft pick higher than 10 overall next year because of the new CBA rules, which is just so funny to me. I mean, that is really like, if you think about it, you're like, oh my God, like they can't even pick one overall. Like they're gonna lose 120 games and they're gonna be like the 10th pick. Oh my God, it's so bad. So anyway.
Yeah, let's move on to it's not necessarily our game related, so I'm not gonna say we're gonna jump into that, but baseball related here. Joey Votto retires. I just thought we should bring it up. He was told he wasn't getting called up, so then he made an announcement he was just going to retire. I mean, there's a lot of angles here, Gray. I mean, they could have called him up for like a week and just let him wave to some fan bases. They could have, I mean, there's a lot of important things they have hanging on last spot in the AL East. And then I guess the last question is like, is he a Hall of Famer overall, Gray? Because that seems to be the next piece that people want answered.
Yeah. So with the I was pretty firmly in the camp of like the Jays should have called him up, just like ceremonial call up and let him wave to the crowd and maybe get in a bat. I was really like all for that as of like last week when he first retired. And I mean, I still wouldn't have been like totally against it, but after looking at his minor league stats, I mean, he said he just wasn't the same. So, I mean, he hit 143 in AAA with a 43% strikeout rate. Like he just wasn't right. I mean, I don't know, his bat got slow. I mean, these things happen. It was a valiant effort to try and get back with the club, but the fact that he really was that bad in the minor leagues this year, I'm kind of okay with the Jays not doing the ceremonial call up, because he said he didn't want it, and I wasn't sure if he was just saying that just because he knew he wasn't getting it. So it's like, hey, you could, if you want, you can just say this was your call versus us. So it looks like you're, taking the high road here. I don't know. Who knows exactly, but he really didn't seem up to the task of being called up. So it's fine. I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, though. I don't really see any reason why he wouldn't be. I'm also like, I'm a big Hall guy, so I'm not necessarily like a person who nitpicks on like some guys. Like, I'm fine. Like, I would have been fine with Jeff Kent being in the Hall of Fame, and it doesn't look like he made it. Like, obviously I'm totally a Barry Bonds Hall of Fame guy. Like, so I'm a big Hall guy, so I'm fine. Like, I think Joey Votto is a first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind. I don't see any reason why not. I mean, he had, it's like Hall of Famers, and to me, a Hall of Famer, if you're like a Hall of Famer for like one thing, like if you can put Mariano Rivera in a unanimous, even if he wasn't unanimous, but he was unanimous, but he goes in as a closer, a 1-inning pitcher goes in like first ballot unanimous. If you can't put Joey Votto in as being like an all world, like plate discipline guy because of how good his on base percentage was, and the fact that he won an MVP, and like he was a great average hitter for a good 10 years. He had a real solid like 10 years there. Maybe it was like 8 years, but he had a solid 8 years. He had on base percentages of like 450 and stuff. Like, if you can put a closer in the Hall of Fame, I feel like Joey Votto's like, I feel like that's an easy Hall of Famer to me.
I mean, Rivera had the benefit of having the narrative. He was Yankees. He won World Series.
I don't really like that whole I don't like that whole World Series.
I don't either, but it's part of it. I mean, that's why Jeter was also
I get it. I know it's not you saying it. I know it's like what people say, but it's like the Votto was on terrible Reds teams. That's not his fault. I mean,
not all of them were terrible, but I agree. Like, it wasn't the Yankees. They don't spend money like the Yankees. I will say this is maybe the place where we disagree the most in all of baseball, is that I want a small, tiny Hall of Fame, because I think you're either a Hall of Fame player or you're not. But I think we've already crossed that line like a long time ago. We crossed that line of not having the Hall be specifically that. I mean, Votto would be the least home runs at the position to go in, I think. The on base has always been great. I guess I'm the guy who will nitpick and give you a name. And my name is a guy who didn't even make it off the first time through, Gray. He literally got kicked off after his first year. He has pretty much identical numbers to Joey Votto in less games, and that's Lance Berkman. Like, Lance Berkman literally did everything Votto did.
But you're arguing with a guy who would, but you're countering that with a guy who would be like, I would be fine with Lance Berkman in the Hall of Fame.
I know. So, I understand. And I'm not, again, I don't think you again wouldn't keep Lance Berkman out, but he literally didn't make it through the first ballot.
Like Bagwell, Helton, like, I mean, all these guys, like, I mean,
Helton in Colorado, who has less numbers than Berkman. Like,
right,
Berkman's numbers are better than Helton's.
I have a harder time with Helton than I do with Votto.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think Todd Helton deserved in. If I'm being honest, I didn't think Fred McGriff, as much as I loved him, I didn't think he deserved to really go in. Goldschmidt is the one out of this next group that, like, him and Freeman are probably both going in, and I'm not sure either really belongs in. I just like Miggy's the no doubter.
What the biggest problem with the Hall of Fame now is not the hitters as much as like the pitchers have just like evaporated. Like, there's so few pitchers that go in, because I feel like the benchmarks for pitchers are so antiquated at this point, because pitchers just don't throw that much. So you look at like an Adam Wainwright, 200 plus wins. That at this point, I mean, within like 10 years, 200 plus wins is going to look like 300 wins to people. It's going to be like, you got 200 wins. Like, I mean, a guy like Jacob deGrom's not even going to get 100 wins. Like, people are just not going to get wins anymore. So yeah, I feel like pitchers are a bigger issue. With hitters, I mean, hitters are I feel like the haul has been, relatively outside of steroids, because that's a messy sort of I don't know. I feel like hitters are more or less been graded properly with the haul outside of steroids, where I feel like it's kind of stupid to be on your high horse about whether or not a guy did steroids. Like Bonds, I mean, there's so many avenues for Bonds to be a Hall of Famer. Like, A, he was a Hall of Famer before he ever took steroids. B, he was never suspended for steroids. So if you're looking at guys who are just never suspended for steroids who potentially did steroids, you could basically say that about like the last, like at least one guy, like, like Pudge Rodriguez, Mike Piazza, Bagwell, like they weren't steroids guys. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But I mean, you could make a case that they were never suspended. So Bonds was never suspended. So why? I don't know. Anyway, this is way off.
So also never suspended. Yeah. I mean, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. It's just based on a report that was proven wrong,
right?
And then a report that was leaked that was like legally not supposed to be leaked, which you technically aren't supposed to hold up in court. Like it wouldn't hold up in court. So it's just really stupid. Let's move on though, Gray. Johan Santana is my pitcher though that I can't believe didn't get. He's another one. He had one run and he was off the ballot. Like Johan Santana was the best pitcher in the middle of the steroids era for years, and like didn't even get a blink at it. It's crazy.
I know. Yeah.
Let's talk about some our game stuff. Dylan Cruz is called up by Washington, number 15 overall on Itch's prospect rankings, number 2 on the Nationals list. AA, he had 51 games where he had 5 home runs, 15 stolen bases. He had 274, 343, 446. And in AAA, he had 49 games, 8 home runs, 10 stolen bases, went 265, 340, and 455. Dylan Cruz must add in all leagues, or what are you thinking here, Gray?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely must add in all leagues. It depends, obviously, on what you're looking at with your team and who you're dropping for him. But I didn't even hesitate in our RCL league, which is a 12-team mixed league. I grabbed him as soon as I heard that he was getting called up on Monday. I grabbed him on like Friday. Power speed plays. I can't imagine that they don't play him every day. So he's going to get the at bats. He's got power and speed, potentially, even a good average, like in AAA, a 17.6% strikeout rate is really solid. I mean, as a 22-year-old is another guy who, like, I think we've said this a bunch this year, like he could be a star as early as next year. Like him and James Wood are really, like, I'm really excited about both of them for next year. Cruz, I think is, potentially for this year, I mean, potentially a drop if he doesn't look great in like the first week, but he's worth the, he's worth getting some skin in the game, right? I mean, it doesn't hurt as long as you're not dropping anyone too valuable. I don't see why you wouldn't pick him up. He's got, if nothing else, he's got some speed. So maybe he adds in some stolen bases. Like I said, he's got good contact, so he should be on base to steal. We'll see. I mean, it'll be a small sample from this point to the end of the season. So I wouldn't necessarily think that he's going to be like, he could potentially not look good in September and just be like, like I said, he could be droppable in a week if he, starts off really cold. But yeah, I like it as a flyer. I mean, why not? I would say, over at least your fifth outfielder in almost all leagues, except for maybe a 10-team mixed league where, if your outfield is stacked or something. But yeah, I mean, as a fifth outfielder, like, it's like, I think, Jake Fraley got injured. So that was an easy drop for me, but I think I dropped Fraley for Cruz, I believe. But I would have dropped like TJ Friedel, and I would have dropped non-Reds outfielders if I had them to drop. I mean, like a fifth outfielder type, I could see losing for him. Like, if you're like, oh, I have Ramon Liriano has been hot, so I have him as my fifth outfielder. Well, it's like, okay, well, drop him and pick up Dylan Cruz. Or if you have like, a really good, potentially good outfielders who just have not been good, like say like a Randy Rosarina. It's like, yeah, I mean, he's been awful all year. At a certain point, it's like you're going down with the ship with Randy Rosarina, or are you going to try and do something else? So I would, like in that respect, I think on Friday in my sell column, which is actually a drop column as of, when trade deadlines are passed, I said Julio Rodriguez was no longer worth rostering. I think you can lose J-Rod in a lot of leagues because like he hasn't done anything like for the last like 2 months. He looks like he's still has ankle problems, so he's not really running. Like in certain cases, depends on the league, but I like Dylan Cruz enough where I would grab him in just about everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Julio's hitting 179 second half. He has 1 home run, no stolen bases. He's only played 15 games as well. So, not performing when he is playing. I mean, that's one of those guys. Yes, if he gets right, he can carry you in a month. But I don't know that that's happening this year. And you've waited already this long. Guy we talked about last week. Would you drop him for Tommy Edman?
I would drop
Tommy Edman for Dylan Cruz.
Yeah, I would drop Tommy Edman for Dylan Cruz. Yeah,
I would as well. All right, great. In under 130 games, 2 very big accomplishments this week. Ohtani goes 40 for 40, does it with a walk-off grand slam, among other things. Gray, like, I guess for our game, do you think he's ever going to get to this kind of stolen base? He's had 12 stolen bases each of the last 2 months. The Dodgers definitely dealing with injuries. Their offense has kind of sucked. That definitely plays into this. But is this Ohtani going to stick around, or is this just circumstantial?
I want to say circumstantial. I think if I'm projecting Ohtani for next year right now, I'd probably put him at like 17 to 22 steals, I think, which is still solid when you consider he's probably going to be, a 35 to 40 homer projections. And you include also, say, 22 starts. So, I mean, he's obviously a top 3 pick for me next year. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think it's sort of circumstantial because like he isn't pitching. So, and he's just sitting on the bench and it's like, why not run? And I think I said this like a couple weeks ago in one of my roundups that it was like, he seemed like he was definitely, sniffing 40-40. And now at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if 50-50 is on the table. Like he seems like he wants those sort of benchmarks. So that's good for us for fantasy, right? I mean, I love that he's running this much this year. I think to expect 40-40 ever again from him, I don't know. It seems like a lot. Maybe 25 to 30 steals next year is that even feels high. Like once he's pitching, like I don't think he's going to run as much when he's pitching. So I don't know. We'll see. But my guess is probably, like I said originally, I think probably 17 to 22 steals for projections for 2025. So definitely down from what we're seeing this year. But yeah, I mean, he I mean, he really is just like, he's basically a fantasy savant. It's like he just wants to hit homers and steal bases. It's like, that's perfect. That's exactly that's what I want from every player. Like, give me all Ohtanis, man. I want a whole team of Ohtanis. I think he's yeah. I mean, he's probably not going to be able to catch Aaron Judge when it comes to overall on the player rater as the number one guy on the player rater, because Aaron Judge is, as great as Ohtani's been. I mean, Aaron Judge is basically doing like a Barry Bonds this year. I mean, every game it's like a home run or two. So like, so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why people are pitching to Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani. Like, it's absolutely absurd what they're doing. I agree. Ohtani does feel like a guy who's chasing the numbers. Like, he saw Acuna last year go 40-40. Is like, well, I can't have people thinking I can't do that. So now I'm going to do 40-40 and maybe more. I agree. I don't think we ever see 40 from him. Even before this kind of adjustment, though, he was kind of on pace for like 25 to 30. So I think that's still possible. Take down, a handful because of the pitching side. So yeah, I think you're in the right area.
Yeah, because also you gotta assume at least 20 to 22 starts next year. So those are 20 to 22 times he's gonna leave in like, or maybe less.
No, he's not leaving anymore. They changed the rules for him.
Right. But he's not going to leave the game, but he's probably, I mean, you're assuming I don't know. I mean, maybe he does run even in games he's throwing, which is crazy, but you assume that they're at least like, I mean, he might hit, but is he going to run in those games? I don't know. Right. Maybe, but it's just
maybe
like,
later after he's out of the game. Yeah, but yeah, maybe. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's like that takes, 20 games off of like whatever it just for steals, at least you would think. I mean, just to be conservative about it. So he's like, that's like 140, say 140 games, 145 games maybe. So you take 20 off. So he's got 125 games to steal, and maybe the day after a start, he, maybe he gets rested a little bit more. Like maybe he gets rested, like maybe, I don't know, 10 games more. Like I'm not saying a lot, but there's just like these little games here and there that you take off his final line. It's like, then you end up at like 17, 22 steals on the year, which is still good when you're considering you're also going to get possibly 170 strikeouts and like all these other stats. I kind of wish that, speaking of Ohtani, I kind of wish the like fantasy sites would give you, like, if you draft them, I feel like you should get the hitting and the pitching. Like you're paying for it. I mean, it's not like you're not paying for both. So it's like, why aren't you given those numbers? Like, of course, if he's pitching, you start him as a pitcher every chance you get if you're in a daily league. But in like weekly leagues, he's either a pitcher or a hitter. So you're not getting both in weekly leagues, which sucks.
It does suck, but it does also give you options when, we get to this time of year, and if you're like my Wharf League or my Perts League team, where your hitting is dominant and your pitching is awful, you can always flip them and use them that side. So it is nice to have that ability, but you're right. You're not really gonna use him in that role very often unless it's towards the end of the year. I think one benefit for him is that he doesn't slide head first already. So like there's a little less risk with him stealing than a lot of the other people who steal a lot of bases, because a lot of other guys are head first sliders. So at least he's not putting hands and arms at risk. But I agree. We've already talked about it. I think the number's going to come down. When he is pitching, I don't know that even with the non-head first slide, you're letting him really run wall pitching. It seems like a lot. Let's move over to the other big accomplishment. You already mentioned Aaron Judge sits atop the player rater. He is having a ridiculous season. He's got his 50th home run in under 130 games. In the second half, Gray, he has 17 home runs, a stolen base, 414, 556, 905. Reminder, he went in the back end of the first or second round, pretty much consensus. Ohtani's behind him at 41 home runs as the next guy. I mean, all these are ridiculous. Congratulations on me handing you the Perks League potentially. And I mean, the question I have is not really into that. That's all great. But who goes number one next year, Gray? I mean, recency bias always factors in at number one. Is it going to be Judge? Is it going to be Ohtani? Should it be somebody else?
Well, there's also Witt, who wouldn't be a bad choice. I don't know. I think I mean, we talked about Witt a little bit last week, whereas like we think his steals could potentially come down. I don't know. I mean, I posed the question: Judge, Witt, or Ohtani as the top three. Is that already locked in? And people were like, no, Ellie De La Cruz over Judge. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, people can have opinions. They're probably wrong if I don't agree with them, but I don't know. I feel like it's Ohtani, Judge, and Witt is like the top three for next year. I just don't see how anyone else breaks into that. I mean, Ellie's good and all, but his strikeout rate is still too high for me to take him above any of those three. I mean, I feel like it's Ohtani, Judge, Witt is how I'm feeling right now. But honestly, if you ask me in a week from now, I might say Judge, Witt, Ohtani. So it's definitely still fluid for me, but I feel like, Judge is definitely in the top three. Is he the top guy overall? Maybe. I could see potentially making that case, but I don't know. I feel like it's nice to get, even if it's, Ohtani brings the pitching and also like we were saying, 17 to 22 steals. Witt brings steals and power. I feel like it's nice to get a little bit of everything, where Judge, it's like just power. And well, I mean, obviously he brings runs, RBIs, and average. But it's nice to get steals too. And Judge isn't really a lock for steals. So I don't know. It's a tough call. I feel like it's, for me right now, it's probably Ohtani, Judge, Witt. But like I said, it's fluid. We'll see.
Yeah, I think I would go Ohtani, Witt, Judge, but again, it could go any direction there. And again, it's really just getting the contributions across. If Judge hits, 65 home runs, of course he's going to be really worthwhile. From the stolen bases for Ellie, I will say his stolen base on the player rater is worth more than Judge's home runs. But you also have to remember, every home run comes with at least one run, one RBI, whereas every stolen base does not come with anything else. So that's part of the issue there. The Reds offense hasn't quite taken the step forward that we thought it might. They also dealt with a bunch of injuries, which hasn't helped them at all. So, I think there's a case where Ellie's better next year. And we've seen high K guys knock that down. At some point it just kind of, they kind of figure it out and get it together. Acuna was a 30% K rate guy, and he's now like a 23% K rate guy. And, another name that we can throw in potentially as right behind that group, just because he's coming off injury, but we know he has the ability to put up numbers as much as anybody else too.
Yeah. And I don't want to, seem like I'm coming off as anti-LA. Like, I'm starting to consider him as early as 4 overall. So it's like, it's just not considering him in the top 3. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm not considering him as soon as 4. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to be against like a guy who could potentially go 30-60, 260 next year. I mean, I feel like that's Ellie's sort of like around his baseline for next year.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be 4 or 5 for me. It's him and Gunnar, I think, are the next two following that group. But we'll talk about that as we get further along the season a little bit more. Let's move over to your favorite game in the world, Gray. And we're going to do it for possible late season breakouts. That is Scientific Fact, Sex Panther, or I Don't Believe You. Connor Norby was recalled last week. He obviously had 15 games earlier in the season, kind of spread out. 4 home runs, stolen base, 268, 281. 6 games since being recalled. He's hitting 375, 400, 792. He's got 2 home runs. He's got a stolen base. What are you thinking about Connor Norby here? Is this the breakout, Scientific Fact, Sex Panther, or I Don't Believe You?
I think that Norby is like, for me, like he was one of the top ads this week across like all my leagues because he's going to Coors for 4 games. So I was all about Norby for this week. So this week, I feel like he's going to look a lot better than potentially he actually is. So this is going to if you listen to this on Wednesday and he's hit 2 homers this week and he just hit a homer on Sunday or whatever, and people are like, wow, 3 homers in 4 games. This is a breakout. Like, yeah, maybe, but he's also in Coors. So, I would sort of like ignore whatever he does this week in for the big picture. I think he's still a guy who I'm absolutely interested in. I just, his walk rate's basically non-existent. I mean, it's a small sample size, but he has an under 2% walk rate in the majors so far. It's, like I said, it's small sample. It's 15 games, so it doesn't mean everything, but he's striking out a decent amount. He looks kind of like a 235 hitter right now with, good power and a very little bit of speed. So say, over the course of a full season, potentially 27 homers, 5 to 7 steals, 235 average on the Marlins, which is not going to get you a ton of runs and RBIs. It's not great. It's not that's not necessarily a 12-team mixed league guy where you draft him and then set him and forget him. That's definitely, a 15-team mixed league or deeper type bat where you've punted a little bit your, corner man. I like him though. I think he's got also upside from all that. I think there's potential for him to get his Ks into a little bit better alignment and have a little bit better average. Maybe he can get into a little bit more power and potentially 10 plus steals. So there's upside on all the numbers I'm saying, but right now I'm interested for sure. I like him. I just think, basically Sex Panther for now. It's a long way of saying Sex Panther.
I agree. I mean, sometimes you see guys going on the minors and they'll just smash the living crap out of the ball, and then they come up and that carries over. In August, he was hitting 271 with a home run in the minors. So, I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility. He just gets hot and does this, but just a couple of nice games here from Connor Norby. If you picked him up, enjoy it, but I wouldn't count on him being, your late season savior as it was. Moving on to the next guy, Jhonkensy Noel. 41 games. He has 12 home runs, 268, 331, 634. He's got a 30% K rate or just under that and a 5.5% walk rate. But so far in August, he has had 17 games with 6 home runs. He's hitting 286, 364, 694, and his K rate has dropped to 25.5%. Is the Jhonkensy Noel breakout finally here, Gray?
Big Christmas. Oh man. Love him. I definitely have a type. I love anyone over 6'4". I'm a fan. I just Actually, he's only 6'1".
I say he's not actually 6'1", but he looks huge.
He looks okay. So Big Christmas looks bigger than he actually is. That might be that I don't know. That might just be an optical.
They have a really small roster there in Cleveland. I mean,
yeah, it's an
Jose Ramirez, Steven Kwan, Andres Jimenez. They're all like 5 foot. So
right, that's probably what's going on. It's an optical illusion. They put really tiny guys around him, and it's like, wow, he's giant.
He's just Tom Cruise the heck out of it.
Yeah, he's Tom Cruise. Yeah, it's like Jhonkensy Noel is basically Tom Cruise. That's what we're saying. I really like Big Christmas. I mean, he's got like 30 homers in a little over 106 games between AAA and majors combined. That feels like what he's capable of. Like, it doesn't feel completely out of the realm of possibilities. He's 22 years old. I mean, unless the average just plummets, there's no speed here. It's not like you're getting a 5 category guy, but he looks like a solid, like, I don't know, like compare him to like Teoscar Hernandez or something. Like, it's like he looks like a good 30 homer type outfielder where, you're not getting much speed and probably hit around like 250. So 30 homers, 250. Yeah, I'm in, man. I say scientific fact. I'm totally in on Big Christmas.
I like it. Yeah, the K rate was the last kind of piece hanging around. If you can keep that down, I mean, I believe the change is happening, and we're seeing, the breakout. I don't know that he's going to be a 280, 275 hitter right away, but I do think eventually he can get to that area and maybe even carry out through the rest of the season, given that he's had this little he's in a good run right now. Pete Crow-Armstrong, PCA for my Cubs, 92 games, 7 home runs, 23 stolen bases. He's hitting 217, 266, 280 on the season with a 22% K rate, 5% walk rate. But in August, he has 4 home runs, 3 stolen bases. He's hitting 284, 342, and 582, 13% K rate, 6.5% walk rate. He finally got some playing time. Is this the breakout, Gray?
Yeah, I feel like he's probably, so his BABIP is at 259 as of right now, and he's hitting 217. He feels like, I mean, anyone who's seen him run, he's like at least a 300 BABIP, probably closer to like a 315, 320 BABIP. So maybe even high as 330 BABIP. So I think he's been a little bit fairly unlucky. Like maybe, the hard contact is really atrocious, so he doesn't hit the ball hard. So maybe that might be affecting his BABIP a little bit. So if he's hitting, but even if he's hitting like ground balls, actually, with how fast he is, the weaker the ground ball, the more chance he's getting on base. Like hit some dribblers to third, man. I kind of like him. He's got good speed in a partial season, 23 steals with 1 caught stealing in only 92 games, and that's only in 263 at bats. So he was like, he was getting into games where he wasn't even getting at bats necessarily. So, 263 at bats, 23 steals, 1 caught stealing. To me, that's like, I mean, he's close to a 35, 40 steal guy. Should hit for a better average. I'm liking him, man. I kind of like him. I feel like there could be a sleeper here for next year. So yeah, scientific fact. I'm in.
Yeah, I'm in as well. And it's not just because he's a Cub. The batted ball contact has gotten a lot better in this time frame as well. You mentioned it was kind of weak before. And actually the BABIP hasn't gotten any better. It's actually gotten worse in the second half. So he's doing all of this with bad luck still. So yeah, I mean, I'm in with him. I think he's mostly speed, but he's shown a little bit of power as of late. So I don't know if it's him getting comfortable and just kind of feeling like he has the ability to swing. Maybe he was just trying to be, too contact oriented early on, or just trying to play for playing time. I don't know, but the contact is a lot better right now. He's not just hitting grounders. He's actually hitting some line drives and and putting some balls in the air. So I don't want that to go too far. You don't want him to be hitting fly balls, but yeah, I'm in on PCA. And if people are ignoring what's happening in the second half, I could see having a lot of shares as a late outfielder next year. Ernie Clement, 108 games this season, 10 home runs, 8 stolen bases, 265, 287, 424. He hasn't struck out like the whole time up. August, he has 4 home runs, 3 stolen bases, 262, 292, 452. I mean, the power numbers have come up a little bit recently, but I mean, he's been a solid hitter pretty much since he's hit the majors here, Greg.
Yeah, no, definitely. He looks like Stephen Kwan minus a bit of speed, maybe a plus on power when it comes to like contact, but he's hitting 265 with a 9% strikeout rate, let's say. It's a little bit under at 8.9, but okay. But still, with that said, like, that without even digging any deep, that tells me he's hitting some pretty weak. He's hitting a lot of weak contact, right? So, and it backs up when you do dig into it. Like his soft contact's pretty high. It's almost as high as his hard contact. So I think this is kind of like a hot streak, which I would ride. I have no problem, rostering him right now. I have him actually in a bunch of leagues. He's been great. He's been pretty solid for a couple weeks now, but at any point I feel like this could go south and just not be worth rostering in any league, or at least not in any mixed league. So yeah, I'm fine with him for now. I guess that makes him a sex Panther, but I don't really believe him big pitcher.
Yeah, it's not that I don't believe him. I think he can do this. I just don't know how useful it is for our game, because he doesn't take walks. So you kind of, average is great, but if you're not taking walks, you're not getting on base and getting runs, which is another way that low power speed guys can put up numbers, like a Luis Reyes when he's useful, Stephen Kwan. They kind of need those counting stats. He's not going to do a lot in power or speed, even given a full season. So I'm with you. I would say it's a scientific.
If you look at what he's doing, he's I don't even think Stephen Kwan is necessarily.
It's like a Reyes.
Yeah, right.
Well, he's going to get double digits something. Reyes may not even do that.
He's kind of like the a little bit Reyes, but he's like his O swing. Ernie Clement's swings on pitches outside the zone is insane. I mean, he doesn't walk and he doesn't strike out, which, you can obviously infer he swings at everything and makes contact. So he makes all kinds of contact on terrible pitches. So at a certain point, the pitchers are just going to be like, you want to swing at everything? Here's a bunch of junk, he's just not going to get great pitches. He swings at everything. So yeah, at some point I feel like he's just going to collapse into a lousy, contact hitter of not even a great average necessarily. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to keep agreeing with you, but I think it's again, I think he can do what he's doing. I just don't think it's much. I think it's 12 and 10, and that's fine. He's gotten a little lucky here. He's 10-8, and he's got another couple months, but I just don't know if it's going to be a lot. Let's move over to a few arms, Gray. Bowden Francis, one of the bright spots in Toronto, 33 innings, 1.91 ERA, 0.61 WHIP, 36 Ks, 5 walks. He's ditched the curve. He's throwing the slider more, ton of split fingers. That's really the biggest difference. Is Bowden Francis turned over a new leaf? Is he now a high strikeout guy with good ratios?
Actually, Bowden Francis has turned into a decent pitcher, and Kevin Gausman has turned into a decent pitching coach.
That's what it feels like, doesn't it?
I think that's what's going on with the Jays. It's like, hey man, you throw that split thing? Can I throw that too? Like, yeah, sure, I can teach it. Yeah, I think like I feel like he had a really good run for like the last 3 games, but he faced like the Cubs, who are terrible, the Angels, who are awful. Twice he faced the Angels, so I think Bowden Francis looks solid as like a number 5 fantasy starter potentially, where I think he could be useful, but I don't think he's necessary. Like I feel like there's going to be definitely starts where you're like, oh, that doesn't seem great. So like him, I think he's in Fenway this week, and I think that's going to be a challenge. We'll see where he ends up after that. But my guess is it's not going to be the best of starts in Fenway. So, I mean, it's hard to also bench him because he's been so good. So I think, I give him the benefit of the doubt. I think I'm starting him in Fenway, but I'm not necessarily looking forward to it. Whereas like, against the Angels, I would throw anyone against the Angels. So the fact that, that he pitched, incredibly well against them, it's like, yeah, okay, but pitch well against a good team, maybe once. So, yeah, I think Sex Panther for now. He doesn't look awful. Like, he doesn't look like a complete, like, he doesn't look like he's going to be a complete dud necessarily, but he's definitely been better than he's probably going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. But also, like, the splitter's nice. So if you just throw that a ton like Kevin Gausman does, I don't know that it's necessarily completely fake. So I'm going Sex Panther with you as well. I don't think he's a 30% sub 2 ERA type of guy. But like mid to high 3s with a good K rate, I could see that if he keeps up this K jump. As you mentioned, 2 games versus the Angels, 1 versus the Cubs. He did have 2 games versus Baltimore and has done fairly well on those. So, I'm not saying it's completely beating up on the dregs, but he did have 12 Ks against the Angels last time. He had 8 previous time out versus them. So we'll see if the strikeouts can stay up. But I do think there's something to this change he's made in regards to just throwing your best pitch a lot. Spencer Schwellenbach, he was drafted in 2021, had Tommy John, missed 2021 and 2022. And then, he's been in the minors. We've seen before it takes a year or so, maybe a little more than a year to get everything back. The second half this year, he's at a 3.35 ERA, 0.88 whip, 36% K rate, 3.5% walk rate. He was at 22% and 5.3 respectively before. Velocity's up a mile per hour since the start of the season. Great. I can't even I'm done trying to predict Atlanta because I just believe in them all. So I need you to tell me if this is a legitimate pitcher or if this is a guy I can use this year and ignore next year.
No, I mean his Spencer Schwellenbach's looks like a solid number 3. I mean, he looks better than Bowden Francis. I would say, I was saying earlier about how like the Angels take pitchers and turn them into bad. they don't develop them well. But the Braves, I feel like, are like the total opposite, at least for the first couple of years that they're up, and then they overpitch them maybe, and then they don't have the longevity potentially, but the Braves
Dodger
definitely
syndrome.
Yeah, the Dodger syndrome, right? I think the Braves definitely seem like they pitch up their guys. Like Schwellenbach looks like better in the majors than he looked in the minors. Like it doesn't, and that's not like the first time we've said that with the Braves. I mean, and no one was expecting Spencer Strider to be like the best pitcher in baseball when he was in the minors. And, Reynaldo Lopez looks incredible. Chris Sale has gotten back to where he was when he was, great. This is going on like actually, it goes back to the 90s, really. But it's definitely in the recent regime of the Braves pitching, it's definitely gone back like at least 10 years now where they just pitch up everyone. I was thinking back on Leo Mazzoni of the 90s, the great pitching coach when the Braves won, those 14 consecutive division titles. And I Googled Leo Mazzoni when you were talking about Spencer Schwellenbach, and Leo Mazzoni, how old do you think he is? He was in the 90s. He was already old. So how old do you think he is?
I have no idea, Gray. He's got to be like 98.
He is 75.
No.
How is that possible?
He was like 70 when I was like 2 years old.
Was he in his 40s in the 90s? He looks so old in the 90s. How is that possible that he's only 75 years old? He was old when we were like kids, wasn't he?
Cocaine's a hell of a drug, Gray.
Okay.
No,
anyway,
yeah, that's crazy though.
Yeah, Leo Mazzoni is not as old as you think. Okay, yeah. So I like Schwellenbach. I'll say scientific fact.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. There's just a little guy in my ear saying that you believe in every Braves pitcher, you idiot. What's going on? But you watch him pitch, and it's not just smoke and mirrors. Like, he's got legitimate stuff, and as I said, the velocity's ticking up. So as long as that stays around through the end of the season, I feel pretty good about it. Just feel like he's recovering back to where he was. And the Braves, outside of a little period where they just couldn't develop any pitchers, like they had Ian Anderson and Tuki Tucson and all these guys like lined up and they had arms for days and they all were terrible. But as soon as that group got out, they really picked it back up with this current group. So,
Tuki Tucson.
Let's move over to one last arm before we get into the bullpen grade. Tobias Myers, not strictly a second half performer. He was really bad in his first 26 innings this year, but he's been pretty great since then. Since June, he's had 76 innings, 13 starts. He's 5-3 with a 2 ERA, a 103 WHIP, 21% K rate, 5.5% walk rate. The difference in the numbers really, there's not a lot in like the pitch mix or anything. He's throwing the cutter more often, and he might have tightened it up a little bit just to, make it differentiate from the slider, but there's not a whole lot changing here. Is Tobias Myers just kind of going to his strengths like we've talked about with Francis and a little bit with, Schwellenbach just kind of getting healthy, but like, can I just get a job if I just go to pitchers and be like, hey, that good pitch you have, throw that, and let's not throw that bad one.
Yeah, exactly. I think also you can't go wrong if you draft only Brewers pitchers that are reasonably priced. Like, you avoid the Freddie Peraltas and just get all those other guys that everyone else on the Brewers staff. Tobias, I'm not as familiar with Tobias Myers, with his minor league track record, but I was looking at it just now, and like, he threw 119 innings as a 19-year-old. It's like, wow. There's like some pitchers, like if Tyler Glasnow threw 119 innings, it would be like, oh my God, is that his season record? There's no, like, Tobias Myers has been throwing like innings forever, man. Like, that was at 19 in 2018, he threw 119 innings. That's crazy. In Double-A, he threw 137 2/3 innings. That's nuts. He throws so many innings. Like, wow. With that said, he looks like he reminds me a little bit of Bowden Francis. Like, he looks like he's like an 8-ish K per 9, low 2 walk per 9, 3.75 ERA pitcher, which is, there's a place for that. He's not as good as he necessarily showing right now on his ERA. Like, right now he's got a 2.87 ERA. I don't think Tobias Myers is a sub-3 ERA guy, but things happen with like Babbitt and homers allowed and left on base. So there's huge fluctuations when it comes to ratios. So, I mean, he doesn't necessarily, like, I'm not saying he's necessarily going to fall off in September, but he's still, I mean, incredibly, because of how many innings he threw last year, he can probably throw till the end of the year, which is wild for a rookie. Like he honestly probably can throw in the playoffs too. Like he has 103 innings on his arm. He can easily throw 30 innings in September. He would still be under where he was last year, and then he could throw in the playoffs. So yeah, I mean, he's like one of the few young arms that actually has innings that he can throw still. So yeah, I mean, I like him. I think he's probably more Sex Panther than anything else, though.
Yeah, I think I'm with you in regards to our game. Just because the K rate isn't anything special, so he's gonna have to throw. He's gonna have to throw those innings. He's gonna have to get some wins, just to stack up Ks. Which, all Ks count the same. If he ends up throwing a ton of innings and racks up Ks, same to some extent. But that's my concern, I guess, going long term. I'm going to throw out a crazy name here, Gray, and you tell me who you'd rather have. Would you rather have Tobias Myers or Aaron Nola rest of season?
Nola.
Okay. I'm just curious because you look at the numbers and they're pretty much identical. And if anything, Tobias Myers has actually been better, as of, the last 60 days or so, or since, he's been throwing. Aaron Nola kind of getting propped up with some wins and things, but his numbers haven't been good, Gray. Over the last 30 days, can you guess where he is on the pitching player rater?
Ooh, no, I mean 75 overall.
Nola? No. Aaron Nola is 498th on the pitching player rater over the last 30 days.
That's only pitchers?
Yeah, that's both pitchers, starters and relievers, but yes.
Oh man. oh, that's not good.
It's not. The numbers actually aren't that bad, Gray. He's just stopped striking people out completely in that time. And not getting wins actually. So like he's been useless as a fantasy pitcher. Tobias Myers is, I believe, 132, which again doesn't sound great, but it sounds a lot better than 498. But that also shows you kind of what happens with pitchers on a month-to-month basis too, to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Gray. Let's move over from that crazy stat there and move into the bullpens. Camilo Duvall, which was crazy that he got sent to the minors, but he's back. Do you think he gets back in the closer mix, or is this now Ryan Walker's job?
No, I think it's Ryan Walker, unless Walker starts faltering. Then maybe Duvall sees a save or two. But I think it's Walker's job for right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's been pretty much spotless since getting the job. He gave up one unearned run, but that's other than that, he's been pretty great. So if you have Duvall and you're chasing saves, I don't think it's necessarily something you have to give up on, but if there's somebody currently getting saves or in a committee, that's probably a better place if you're really chasing that number. For the Cubs, Jorge Lopez, we decided was the guy. Now it's Porter Hodge, but now it might be back to a committee. What are you thinking in regards to the north side?
I think it's probably going to be a committee because I would guess that the Cubs just don't want anyone really getting, like, one guy getting saves because it's an arbitration thing. So I would guess that they just give saves to whoever really kind of, whoever's in the best spot to get the save that day. I don't think they're going to have a set closer. I would probably say if I had to pick one, I'd probably go Hodge. Just because, he's a little bit younger, a little sexier than Lopez. But yeah, I mean, Lopez could get saves. Or even Merriweather could potentially get saves. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a set closer, but I would probably go Hodge.
Yeah, I think what happens is, the Cubs are 7.5 back with a month and a half to go, or a month-ish to go. I think eventually, and maybe like by eventually, I mean this week or next week, they're going to give it to Jorge Lopez just because, as you mentioned, there's arbitration numbers, there's things that concern with Porter Hodge, whereas Jorge Lopez is a vet. He's not on an arbitration type of thing. So I could see them handing the job to him the rest of the season again, just to kind of keep Hodge's numbers down for future reference. But unless they go get somebody, Hodge could be it for next season if we're looking at some kind of keeper dynasty situation. Some places you're not going to keep a closer is Colorado, but Victor Vodnik goes to the IL. Who is stepping up over there in Colorado to fill his spot?
I guess Tyler Kinley, but I wouldn't pick up anyone there. I would avoid the whole situation. Honestly, I wouldn't go near it. I would not. Kinley, I think, has like a 6-ish ERA. I mean, I would not go anywhere near that whole situation. It's not worth the saves.
Yeah, it's not a great position. That closer role has been kind of tainted. Everybody who gets it just struggles with it for some reason. So I'm with you. I don't think I'm really trying to get involved with this. Tyler Kinley, I know you read the numbers for season. Recently, he has been good. This week, they're at home pretty much the whole week, or actually all week. I think they're at home. So this is not the week to chase Colorado saves, but in regards to Kinley himself, he has actually been pretty good recently, at least. Moving over to the Dodgers, Kopech has been great, but Evan Phillips got a save. Do we think this is back to a mix? Do we think Evan Phillips might get the closer role back? Anthony Band has also been amazing. Do we think he's worth a grab? What are your thoughts on the Dodgers closer situation?
Yeah, I think Banda probably gets like situational saves because he's a lefty. So I wouldn't really concern myself with Banda unless, it's a super deep league. I would say Kopech Phillips is probably a 60-40 share right now. I don't know who's 60 or who's 40. I don't know. I have no idea. I would guess it's Kopech and then Phillips, 60-40 Kopech on the 60 side, but it could flip and Phillips could be the lead for, it's at the discretion of Dave Roberts. So how are you reading into that, man? You can't read into that.
No, it's really hard to decide. It could go any number of directions. I agree. It's probably a committee and they just go with whoever. They've all been pretty great as of late. I mean, Anthony Banda is somebody you can pick up if you're just chasing ratios and not necessarily saves, or if you're going after holds, because he's been phenomenal all season. Chad Green got the save. Is he back atop the Blue Jays closer hierarchy for the few games they're going to win the rest of the season?
Yeah. Chad Green's. He's been great all year. I put Chad Green in my active lineup in one of my leagues, and I haven't really moved him for months now. He's been really good. I like Chad Green.
Yeah, when he's healthy, he's been good. He just lost the job to health, and now it seems like they've given it back to him. Tampa Bay is a complete mess, Gray. Are you trusting anybody to get you a save there? And if you have to go with somebody, who is it?
Edwin Yoshida looks pretty good. I mean, his peripherals, he looks like basically like the best closer in baseball. If his numbers stay where they are, I mean, his numbers are insane. He's got 11.2 K per nine, a 1.2 walk per nine, a 0.86 ERA, just like lights out, insanity. So I would grab him and, hope he gets a save or two. And if he doesn't, at worst, I think you probably get good ratios. Clevenger and Manuel Rodriguez probably see some saves because the Rays are a bunch of cheap bastards, and they're looking to keep arbitration costs down. So I don't think you said he gets all the saves, but he looks good.
Yeah, I mean, he looks amazing. He's pretty much been doing it the whole season, and it's just unfortunate that they're giving it to other people, but it's the Rays, so that's what they do. Manuel Rodriguez got a save. Garrett Clevenger got a save. Those are probably the names that you're looking at in regards to who might get a save this season. Tyler Alexander could throw his name in the mix. Littell just went on AL. Fairbanks went on AL. So I think those are the three that we're looking at. Why don't you give the people some waiver wire bats, Gray?
Okay, so we mentioned earlier, Jhonkensy Noel, Big Christmas, has been insane for the last week. Absolutely should be rostered everywhere. Eugenio Suarez has been good going back to like July 2nd, I believe. He hit a home run and had 10 homers in July. 4 homers, I believe, in August, but hit for a good average. He's raised his average like 60 points, I think, in the last 2 months. He's been really good. Gerardo Perdomo, again, another Diamondback. Lourdes Gurriel Jr., another Diamondback. All really have been solid for the last week or so. Diamondbacks have been good for a couple weeks now. Connor Norby, we mentioned him earlier. He goes to Colorado for 4 games. I grabbed him everywhere. Helio Ramos has been hot. He should probably be rostered everywhere by now. Ramon Urias, Orioles he's been playing and he's hot. He hit like 300 in the last week with 2 homers. Max Muncy returned from the IL, started hitting homers immediately. Looked good. Zach McKinstry, Tigers guy who's got eligibility everywhere. He's been really good. Adrian Del Castillo, catcher for the Diamondbacks. Again, another Diamondback. Jake McCarthy, another Diamondback. Diamondbacks have just been really good. I would Diamondback stack. I would do a diamond stack. Diamond stacks. The diamond stacks. JD Martinez has been hot. Pete Crow-Armstrong, who we mentioned earlier, and Addison Berger and JJ Bleday. So there's some names for you.
Yeah, great. To your point about the Diamondbacks, over the last 30 days, they have 188 runs. The next closest is 149, Gray. So they are absolutely crushing right now. In August, it's 143 to 118, if you were curious. So they're just running away from everybody in regards to scoring. On the pitching side, definitely avoid those Arizona Diamondbacks. But also you can look at David Peterson at the White Sox, Ryan Nelson versus the Mets, Kaider Montero versus the Angels, Javier Assad at Washington, Michael Lorenzen at Cleveland and at Houston, Tyler Alexander at Seattle, DJ Hers versus the Cubs. I think that's probably the shortest list I've had in a while. It was not a great week for streaming, Gray, and
I was a little sad. I was a little sad you didn't mention Domingo Herman. I shouldn't start him, huh? I should avoid that 2-start week. Oh,
yeah, maybe not, Gray, but well, you do what you're feeling in regards to that. If you want to take that chance, you go do that one. But he's also. Yeah, whatever. We'll move off of that. If you have specific questions, come find us on Twitter. I'm at RazBeaton. Gray is the at Razzball account. You can also leave questions in the comments on youtube.com/Razzball Fantasy. Like, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you watch us, listen to us. Until next week, good luck, and I'll talk to you later.
Late.